The year is 1645. In the shadowed courtroom of Chelmsford Assizes, Essex, a young woman named Mary trembles in chains, her bare feet scraping the cold stone floor. The air reeks of unwashed bodies and damp straw, thick with the murmurs of a fearful crowd. Mary's hair hangs in matted strands over her bruised face, marks from nights without sleep, watched by unblinking eyes. She is 22, a simple dairymaid from Manningtree, accused of bewitching cattle and cursing a neighbour's child. Her only crime? Poverty, a sharp tongue, and the misfortune of living in a land torn by civil war. As the judge intones the verdict, guilty of witchcraft, Mary whispers a prayer, but no one listens. Outside, the gallows creak in the wind, waiting for her and 18 others that day. Matthew Hopkins, the self-styled witchfinder general, stands in the corner, his gaunt face impassive, tallying his fee. 20 shillings per witch. He has hunted dozens like her, but this is just the beginning of England's bloodiest witch panic. What Hopkins cannot foresee is that his crusade, born of chaos, will claim hundreds before crumbling under its own weight, while the truths of innocence and injustice will echo for centuries. This is not the fairy tale witchcraft of broomsticks and cauldrons. This is the England that drowned the innocent and hanged the desperate. If you've ever wondered how fear turns neighbours into executioners, you're in the right place. Here on Brutal History, we unearth the fragments history tried to bury. Assize records, pamphlets sealed in archives. Every view, every like, every subscription drags one more voice from the silence. Now, let's return to Mary, because her ordeal is only the spark in a powder keg of paranoia. To grasp what happened to Mary and hundreds like her, you need to understand the fractured world that birthed the Hunts. In 1642, England plunged into civil war. King Charles I versus Parliament, royalists against Roundheads, brother against brother. Villages like Manningtree became battlegrounds of suspicion, where crop failures, strange illnesses, and wartime hardships were blamed on the devil's work. Superstition festered in the chaos. Old laws from 1542 and 1604 made witchcraft a capital crime, but enforcement had been sporadic until Matthew Hopkins emerged. Born around 1620 in Suffolk, the son of a Puritan minister, Hopkins was no trained inquisitor. A failed lawyer in his 20s, he seized opportunity amid the war's lawlessness. In March 1645, in Manningtree, he accused an elderly one-legged widow, Elizabeth Clark, of witchcraft after locals claimed her imps, demonic familiars, had caused mischief. Hopkins and his associate, John Stern, a stern yeoman with a zealot's glare, watched her for days, bound to a stool, deprived of sleep, until she confessed to consorting with the devil. This method, torture disguised as vigilance, became their hallmark. Hopkins styled himself Witchfinder General, though Parliament never granted the title. He roamed East Anglia on horseback, a black-clad figure with a wide-brimmed hat, charging towns £6 to £23 for his services, plus expenses. In a land starved by war, he grew rich on fear. Mary's nightmare began in the summer of 1645 as Hopkins' campaign swept through Essex. She lived alone after her parents died in a plague outbreak, tending cows for a local farmer. Whispers started when a calf sickened and died, bad milk, they said, but Mary's muttered curse at the beast sealed her fate. A neighbour, nursing a grudge over a disputed fence, accused her of sending a spectral cat to scratch his child. Hopkins arrived like a plague doctor, his eyes scanning for marks. The searches were invasive, humiliating. Women stripped and prodded by prickers, wielding needles. Any mole, scar or blemish that didn't bleed was a devil's teat, proof of satanic suckling. Mary had a birthmark on her shoulder, innocent but damning. They bound her thumbs to her toes and threw her into a pond for the swimming test. Sink and drown as innocent, or float as a witch buoyed by the devil. She floated, gasping, her dress heavy with water. Dragged out, she was confined in Colchester Castle, a grim fortress turned prison where Hopkins' watchers patrolled. For 4 days and nights, they denied her rest, pacing with lanterns, waiting for familiars to appear. Exhaustion broke her. She confessed to a pact with Satan, naming imaginary imps, a black dog named Shadow, a toad called Croak. It was delirium, but enough for the noose. The trials were spectacles of terror. At Chelmsford in July 1645, Hopkins oversaw the largest single execution in English history. 19 hanged in one day, including women from nearby villages. Mary stood among them, her confession read aloud as evidence. No defense was allowed. Spectral evidence, visions of witches' spirits, sufficed. Judges like the Earl of Warwick nodded approval, swayed by Hopkins' pamphlets, like his 1647 The Discovery of Witches, boasting of his methods. Across East Anglia, the hunts raged. In Suffolk, 68 executed. In Norfolk, dozens more. Not all were women. Men like John Lowes, an 80-year-old vicar from Brandeston, were targeted too. Lowes endured pricking, swimming, and watching until he confessed to sinking ships with magic. He was hanged reciting the Lord's Prayer, a feat witches supposedly couldn't manage. Hopkins' tally climbed. Estimates say 200 to 300 accused, over 100 executed between 1645 and 1647, more than all other English witch trials combined. Bodies swung from gibbets in Bury St Edmunds, Aldeburgh and Ipswich, warnings to the wary. Graves were denied, corpses dumped in unmarked pits or left for crows. Resistance flickered in the shadows. In some towns, like Great Yarmouth, locals balked at Hopkins' fees and questioned his authority. A minister in Stowmarket preached against the frenzy, calling it murder under colour of law. But fear silenced most. The witchfinder's word carried the weight of scripture, his touch the power of the noose. Families whispered doubts only behind bolted doors, for even hesitation could look like heresy. Mary, in her final hours, retracted her confession in a smuggled letter, discovered centuries later in assize fragments, writing, "I spoke lies from weariness, but God knows my soul is clean." She was ignored. The magistrates had their proof, and the crowd had its spectacle. On the scaffold, as the rope tightened, she cried out for mercy, her voice lost in the jeers. The crowd demanded the devil be cast out, blind to the truth that evil wore human hands and held a ledger. Hopkins watched, unmoved, before riding to the next village, his horse's hooves thudding like judgment. The hunts burned out as quickly as they ignited. By 1646, skepticism crept through the smoke. A judge in Norfolk demanded evidence beyond pain and rumour. Local gentry began refusing to pay Hopkins's fees. In some counties, jurors simply stopped convicting. The wind had shifted. Parliament, mired in civil war, no longer cared for witches. The panic had eaten itself. Hopkins retreated to Manningtree, his reputation souring. Villagers whispered that he was cursed, that the devil he hunted had come for him instead. When he fell ill in the summer of 1647, tuberculosis, most said. Some claimed it was retribution. Others believed he'd faced his own test, the water rejecting him. He died before 30, buried in unmarked ground. His partner, John Stern, tried to justify their work in print, penning a confirmation and discovery of witchcraft. But the words rang hollow. He too faded into obscurity. The war ended in 1651, and with peace came the slow reckoning. England's courts grew reluctant to pursue the invisible. The last witch was hanged in 1684. By 1735, Parliament repealed the laws entirely. But the ghosts did not rest. In East Anglia's churchyards, 19th century diggers unearthed skeletons bound at wrist and ankle. Jawbones cracked where gags had been forced. History had tried to forget, but the earth remembered. Today, Manningtree bears a plaque marking Hopkins' home. The house is a pub now, warm lights, laughter and ale. But locals say on storm nights, the rafters creak like ropes under strain. Tourists come to see the Witchfinder's house, but few stay long. Artifacts in small museums, needles for pricking, the tools of confession, sit under glass, silent witnesses to state-sanctioned cruelty. They are reminders that the line between justice and hysteria is thinner than parchment. The English witch hunts lasted only a few years, yet their echoes have never stopped. Mary's life ended in the square, but her letter survived centuries, folded into time like a prayer. Its ink, faded and fragile, bears the weight of every woman who ever confessed to save her skin, only to lose it anyway. Her words remind us that the worst tyrannies are born not of evil alone, but of fear, greed, and silence. You've walked through history's deadliest witch panic, through torture chambers, confession rooms, and gallows fields. If this reminds you how fragile justice truly is, subscribe to Brutal History and keep the past alive. The accused were meant to vanish, confessions coerced, names erased. But they didn't. They live on in court rolls, in the letters Mary wrote, in the fragments scholars still piece together today. And now they live in you, because you listened, remembered, and refused to let fear have the last word. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.